Hi everybody, Mr. Wyatt here, and today we're looking at section 3 of topic 11. We're going to be talking about area, circumference. Those are both just reviews because we've already been learning about area and circumference. Um, and then we'll be looking at some irregularly shaped figures too and seeing if we can find their areas. All right, so our learning goals today, I can separate irregular figures into known shapes. And then secondly, I can use formulas to find the areas of those irregular figures. I'm actually going to make two videos today. The first video is going to be just talking again about circumference and area, reviewing them, and also figuring out how to work backward to find the radius of a circle if all we're given is the circumference. After that, I have a second video where we'll be looking at some irregular figures and seeing if we can find the areas of those figures by finding some known shapes that make up those figures. Okay, so let's get started here. And I have this circle and I want to find the circumference and the area of this circle. Use 3.14 for pi and round to the nearest tenth if necessary. So if it doesn't come out really nicely, we'll have to round to the nearest tenth when we are done. Okay, so how do I find circumference and how do I find area? We have two formulas that we need to know when we're working on circles. The first formula, circumference, simply states C equals, and I got to get my pen to write here for some reason. It doesn't want to write. C equals pi d, which means you take pi, 3.14, times the diameter of that circle to find its circumference. I don't really like that yellow. That's too light, so maybe I'll go with something darker here. It'll be hopefully a little easier to see. So C equals pi times d. That's one formula that would be really good if you memorized that formula. And then to find the area, we find A equals pi r squared. These are the only two formulas that we really ever use for circles, just these two. And they're pretty easy to remember. You know, one of them, pi r squared, has squared in it, and you know what? Area is always square units, isn't it? So it's easy to remember the area formula must be the one that has squared in it. The other thing I'm noticing is to find circumference, I need to know what is the diameter of the circle. But to find area, I need to know what is the radius of the circle. So the very first thing that I would always recommend you do is write down r equals and d equals. Let's just find the radius and let's find the diameter. Looking at this example, we are given this measurement right here, connecting the center of the circle to the outside of the circle. That's your radius right there. Remember, the radius connects the center of the circle to the outside of the circle. So r is 12 inches. The diameter goes all the way across the circle, and it's always exactly double the value of the radius. So since the radius is 12, the diameter must be 12 times 2, double that amount, which is 24. So I have both of these written down, and then when I go over here to find the circumference or the area, I can just look back here to see which number I should use. All right, so let's find the circumference. C equals, I'm just rewriting the formula, but now I'm going to substitute in some numbers. In place of pi, it says to use 3.14. Times the d, the diameter, which we wrote down is 24. See how handy it was having that just written down so I could just grab it and plug it in here? So the circumference, C, equals, and now you can go ahead and use a calculator. I just have a regular calculator here, but I'll take 3.14 times 24, and it equals 75.36. All right, now it does say to round to the nearest tenth if necessary. In this example, that is necessary. In the tenths place, I have a 3. To the right of that in the hundredths place is a 6. And remember, if it's 5 or more, then we'll let this 3 soar. And that's 5 or more, so the 3 will round up to 4. So my circumference is 75.4. My label is inches. All this means is that if you travel around this circle, it's about 75.4 inches going around the outside of that circle. Now the area, that's referring to all of this space inside of the circle, okay? I'm trying to shade it in without crossing out any of the numbers that I've written down. The area is the space inside of this circle. So now area equals pi, 3.14, times the radius, and the radius r equals 12, times 12 squared. So now we can solve this. If you have a scientific calculator, you can enter 3.14 times 12 and then hit the x squared button and then hit enter and you'll get your answer. I don't have a scientific calculator, so I'm going to find 12 squared first. 12 times 12 equals 144, and then multiply that by 3.14, and I get 452.16. You definitely will want to use calculators. Oops. You definitely will want to use calculators on today's assignment. So I have 452.16. Rounding to the nearest tenth, I have a 1 in the tenths place. In the hundredths place is a 6, which is 5 or more. So we will let that 1 soar up to a 2, and we get 452.2. 452 and 2/10. And area is always square units, so I'll have square inches for my label. Okay, so yes, we've already talked about how to find circumference a couple lessons ago, and then in our last lesson we talked about how to find area of a circle. So this is just a review, but there you go. That's your circumference, and this is your area, rounded to the nearest tenth of this circle. Okay, so what would you do if you were asked to find the radius of the following circles with the given circumference? How would you go about doing that? And it says round to the nearest tenth when necessary. And so let's look at this first example here. What if the circumference is 62.8 meters? In other words, what if the distance around the circle is 62.8 meters? Can you find the length of the radius? Well, I'm not given any measurements here other than the circumference. And since all I'm given is the circumference, I have no option but to use the circumference formula. So let's write that down. C equals pi d. The circumference formula, the area formula, they're the only two tools in our toolbox, you could say, when working on circles. So I use the circumference formula here because I'm given the circumference. And let's substitute this in. 62.8 goes in for C. 62.8 equals pi, well that's 3.14, times d, the diameter. All right, now I have a one-step equation. To find d, I now undo the times here by dividing by 3.14. You can always go back and watch this video again if I'm going too quickly for you. But we divide both sides of the equation by 3.14. That's gone then, and we have d equals, and this actually divides really nicely. It equals 20. So the diameter, d is the diameter, is 20 meters. I'm looking for the radius. Since I know the diameter is 20 meters, how would I find the radius? I'd have to divide by 2. Take your 20 meters, which is the diameter, divide it by 2, and you get 10 meters. So the radius is 10 meters if the circumference is 62.8 meters. The directions did say to round to the nearest tenth. When necessary, it isn't necessary here, is it? We got a nice whole number answer, 10 meters. Let's try another one. What if the circumference were 40 inches? What would the radius of that circle have to be if the circumference or distance around the circle is 40 inches? Again, I'm given the circumference, so I will start by writing down the circumference formula. C equals pi times d. So now let's substitute 40 in place of the c. 40 equals pi, 3.14, times d, the diameter. Now, this is 3.14 times d, so I need to divide by 3.14 in order to undo that, which means I also have to do the same thing on the left side of this equal sign. So d equals, this doesn't look like it's going to work out nearly as nicely as the last one. I'll grab my calculator, I'll go 40 divided by 3.14 equals, and it says 12.738853. Now I want to find the radius, remember? This is the diameter, d. So I need to divide this by 2 in order to find, oops, I got a mess here now, in order to find the radius. Man, this is really not working very well for me. So the radius, I already have 12.738853 in my calculator. See that? So I'm just going to divide that by 2. Divide by 2 equals, and I get 6.3694. There are a bunch more digits. I really don't need to write them down. 265. Because I'm going to round to the nearest tenth here. It is necessary here. The tenths place has a 3 in it. The hundredths place has a 6. Since that's 5 or more, we're going to round the 3 up to a 4. And we end up getting a radius. Man, oh man, am I making a mess here. We end up getting a radius of 6.4 when we round that. 6.4 what? Inches. So my radius, if the circumference is 40 inches, then the radius must be 6.4 inches. All right, that's it for video 1. Be sure to watch the second video now, and you'll get to see how we handle some irregularly shaped figures and how we find their areas.